And a 1, and a 2, and a 1, 2, 3.
Ryan Metzler's top 100 games of all time. Some are good and some are bad and some are sublime. Ryan has a PhD, lost his Euro certainly. Felt his favorite, can't you see? So here's his favorite
Top 100 games.
Hey everybody, welcome to the 7th edition of Ryan Metzler's Top 100 Games of 2013. This time we're going to take a look at games 40 through 31. Without too much ado, why don't we just get right into the games.
Number 40, Agricola.
Game number 40 on my list is one you're going to see on BGG's Top 100. It's also one that you're going to see on a lot of Top 100 lists, probably most Top 100 lists, and of course it's no surprise it's on mine. And that game is Agricola by Uwe Rosenberg, which is probably the quintessential worker placement game. One that everybody thinks of when they think worker placement, and that's because it's very well done. This is a game about farming, each player controlling a family of farmers who are trying to make their farm the best, and you're going to do this by placing workers onto actions. The order that these actions appear in each game will be different, so the game has a little bit of variety there. In addition to that, the way that your opponents are going to play is going to be different each game, and on top of that, there are different professions and different improvements which come in the form of decks of cards that will change from game to game, and that makes this game one that has a lot of variety, which is probably its main selling point. The game is incredibly expandable. It has all kinds of different actions you can take and all types of different routes to get victory points, be it raising animals or fencing in areas on your farm. You can go for the improvements and the jobs, which will give you victory points. Or you can try and have a large family and build a large house, and that's worth victory points as well. It plays well with any number of players from 2, I believe it plays up to 5. I'm actually not entirely sure of the range. And it actually goes down to 1 if you're looking for a single-player game. There is a variant you can play of this, which is basically score as many points as you can in an allotted amount of time, which, of course, makes it easily accessible because you can play it whenever you want, even if you don't have somebody to play with. It's a very good worker game. It's one of Uwe Rosenberg's best games. Not his best game in my opinion, but one of his best, and one that I think belongs in a lot of Eurogame collections, if not all Eurogame collections. So if that sounds good to you, check it out. That is Agricola from Z-Man Games and Uwe Rosenberg.
Number 39, Container.
Game number 39 on my list is perhaps one of the driest games, one of the driest themes in a game that I've ever seen. That game is Container. This is literally a game about shipping cubes or containers around in a player-driven economy. Each player is going to be running a production and shipping company where they produce goods and then sell those goods to the other players, then try and buy goods back from the other players in order to ship them to a central island. And shipping the right types and amounts of containers is going to be worth victory points. Each player's goal is hidden, so you don't really know what other players are trying to do, but you can try and kind of piece that out from what they're producing and what, of course, they're buying from other players. However, once you take the goods to a central island, you're going to auction them off, and each player has the chance to bid on them. You can either sell those goods to the other players, or you can not take their money and to essentially pay 2 to 3 times as much in order to take the goods for yourself. However, if you really need those goods, they'll be worth it at the end of the game because certain goods are worth more points than others to certain players. So there's a hidden aspect in the goals of the game. There's a player-driven economy, and it all plays out in a very strategic and very interesting manner. There's not a whole lot more I can say about it. It's just a very interesting, very deep, and very strategic game. I definitely suggest checking this one out. That's Container from Valley Games.
Number 38, New Era.
The 38th spot on my list is occupied by a game that is a tableau building game combined with a worker placement game. It's really the only way I can describe it, and that game is called The New Era. Now this is mostly a card game, and this is actually the standalone expansion to 51st State, but it does replace the 51st State cards, and then expands upon the game, simplifying some of the mechanics, which is why I chose The New Era over 51st State for this position on my list. In this game, you're going to have cards, and you're going to be playing those cards to the table. You're also going to have workers that you can use to activate those cards and different resources that you can use to turn into victory points and different types of things. In addition to that, you're going to have the ability to play on other people's cards that they're playing out into their tableau. And doing so is going to give you the benefits of their card and kind of deprive them from the ability to take those actions as well. So you're trying to pay attention to several different things. You're trying to pay attention to what you can build from your hand in order to get the most victory points, where you can place your workers in order to best benefit yourself, and where you can place workers to prevent your opponents from accomplishing what they're trying to do. All while trying to pay attention to the cards that are being played by several different players, changing the landscape of where you can do things. So there's a lot of change going on. The game is going to vary from time to time depending on what faction you play and what cards are out on the table, but it's always dynamic, it's always changing, and it has that aspect of combining two different types of mechanic that I both find very interesting, which is the tableau building and the worker placement. It's kind of a unique feel in that aspect. There's not a whole lot of games that combine those two things. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit of a mix between two genres, check out The New Era from Portal Games. Very interesting title.
Number 37, Star Wars LCG.
The next game in my top 100 is a LCG. We're back to the LCGs. We saw Warhammer Invasion before. This time, this is going to be another two-player LCG where you have direct competition between the two players. That game is going to be Star Wars, the card game, again from Fantasy Flight, which owns the term living card game, which is why you don't see it coming out anywhere else. But this is essentially a two-player living card game in which one player will typically play a dark side and one player will play a light side. Now, each player is going to have a deck of cards that they've built, and you can customize these decks, which is kind of the idea of these LCGs. You can customize them using what they call sets of cards, or I'm not sure if they're called sets, but they're essentially pre-made groups of cards that you can include into your decks. And if you decide you want one card from a grouping, you have to take the entire grouping of cards. So it makes the deck creation a little bit interesting, but a little bit easier than some of the LCGs like Warhammer Invasion or Lord of the Rings, where you can choose an entire set of cards and the deck construction follows a pattern once you've done that. Now, you still have your choice of all of the different expansions and all of the different sets to combine and create these customized decks, but once you've done that, a couple of times you'll see that it's a little bit easier because you have to include entire sets of cards, and you can only have a certain amount of sets. The game itself is pretty straightforward. You're going to try and generate resources in order to play cards, and then use those cards to combat other players. But cards can also be discarded for specific types of battles, and you can use them for various different effects throughout the game. Pretty standard LCG style, but one that plays out pretty well because of the simplistic deck building, or the simplified deck building, I should say. It's a little bit more accessible while still maintaining the standard 1v1 deck building feel. If you're looking for something that's pretty easy to get into, it has a great theme, of course. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so that's a plus for me. And of course, still has that strategy of your typical CCG. Check out Star Wars, the card game.
Number 36, just watch the video.
The game at the 36th position on my list is one that was originally missing from my list when I created it. When I made my top 100, I went through when I was done and noticed that there was no game number 36. So I went back and I looked through to try and see what was the glaring omission. And when I looked through that list, this game popped up, and that is The Princes of Florence. I don't know how it wasn't on my list. Perhaps it was originally in position 36, but it definitely belongs on the list. This is a game that has auctions in it, but it also has kind of a spatial element, and it has an element of trying to have the right things in your area in order to satisfy certain, I guess they're people or inventors or workers or artists or whatever the case may be. You need to have certain buildings and certain features in your town or in your village in order to have those people at your place, and they work more efficiently based on the things that are there. Now, you're going to be auctioning or buying things in auctions based on this concept. You're going to have these people and you're going to be trying to satisfy them as best as possible, getting the highest work value you can out of them. But in order to do so, you have to go through these auctions, and in each auction round, only one of each type of building or resource or area is available. So there's parks and ponds and fountains and different types of buildings that'll all be available, but only one person can build each round. So if you need something, you really have to be on your toes to try and pay for it. If you can't afford it, you may have to wait until a future point. And so essentially, you're going to be trying to get the things you need at the right time, outbidding other players, but conserving enough money to do the same on the next round. And then trying to satisfy these people that you're placing into your area to get the highest work value you can in order to score victory points, of course. I've reviewed the game relatively recently, so I'm not going to go into it too much more than that, but it offers a very interesting dynamic where each player is only able to get one thing that everybody else is basically deprived of, and then you have to best plan around what you were or weren't able to get. The game is very cool. One that I had in my collection, I traded it away, and then I got it back again simply because I loved it so much. That's The Princes of Florence by Aaliyah and Rio Grande.
Number 35, Tribune.
Tribune is a very unique style of Euro game. In this game, each player is going to be placing workers out onto a board into several different areas. But each of these areas is activated differently. In some areas, you're going to be able to just buy specific cards. Now, buying these cards is a set collection aspect of the game. So you'll be able to buy certain cards. You'll know what they are, you can see them, and you can place out and buy them right off the bat. In other areas, you're going to essentially place, and there are going to be face-down cards, and you can choose from these face-down cards which one you'd like to take. You can put that into your area. In other areas, there are going to be cards that are revealed as players play. So the first person to play will reveal some of the cards, the second person will reveal the rest. And from those cards, each player will be able to choose one. But the first person to play doesn't know what's there at all, so they're taking a little bit of a gambit. And so forth and so on. There are certain areas you can only place if you have certain qualifications. But all of the goals are to collect these cards and have the most of these cards at a specific time. When you get these cards, you're trying to accomplish specific objectives, and each type of different colored card gives you a different type of bonus. And if you're at the top of each of these things, you'll have a different ability that you're able to play out based on these bonuses. Collecting all of these is going to lead you towards getting tribunes, or tributes, which are going to be the way you win the game. Each time you start this game, you're going to have specific goals. Some of them may be to have a specific amount of money. Some of them may be to control different factions of the game. You may have to control the Praetors, you may have to control the Gladiators. And controlling all of these will give you one of those victory aspects, which is going to, move you closer towards the end of the game. The nice part is that you can always change up what these are. The game includes several different scenarios, so based on which one you choose at the beginning of the game, the victory conditions are going to shift. It's a set collection base with a worker placement addition, and then variable endgame conditions to round it all out. So it always plays out differently. The cards may be in different positions. The goals, of course, are going to change. It just keeps it fresh each time. It feels different than anything else I've played, which is why it makes this list and why it's so high on the list. And it's one that I got into relatively early and still enjoy in my collection. So if you're looking for a unique feel on a worker placement and set collection game, one that gives you different ways to place out, different strategies to try and collect cards, check out Tribune and its expansion, Tribune the Expansion. Very good game from Fantasy Flight Games if it's still available. I actually haven't checked, but if it is, you should definitely pick it up.
Number 34, Antics.
The next game on my list is one that's relatively old, but produced by a couple of brothers who are famous for producing one game a year, and that game always being in high demand. This one is Antics, and Antics is by the Fragor brothers, or Fragor Games. In this game, you control an ant hive. Much like in Mermes or Mirmez, which you saw in the last video, you control an ant hive in this game, but the game mechanics are really quite different between the two games. In this one, you're trying to control your ant hive in order to move out into an environment and pick up different types of prey. And for each different type of prey you're able to pick up, you're going to benefit in the terms of victory points. You're also trying to pick up leaves and store those leaves on your hive or on your ant hill, which is what you're going to be building out throughout the game in order to improve your actions. Now, in this game, you'll actually have tiles that you're going to get throughout the game in order to build up a physical ant hill that you have on your board. And each player will have their own ant hill composed of different tiles that they're going to stack on top of each other. On these ant hills, you're going to have several different things, and primarily amongst them, you're going to have the different types of actions you can take. So when you place out, you're going to build this up level by level, and on those tiles will be pictures of the different actions where you're going to place your ants in order to activate them. The higher an action is on your ant hill, the better it's going to be. So if it's on level 1 of your ant hill, you'll get to do that action once, or a level 1 version of that action. If you're on the second level, it'll be a level 2 version, and 3 level, so forth and so on. So the higher up you need, or you place these actions, the better they're going to be. So you can focus on building your anthill around a specific action in order to make that action very good. Or you can focus around building your anthill in order to provide places which are kind of heaps where you can place leaves that you collect. And the higher and the better you place these leaves, the more victory points there'll be at the end of the game. So you're trying to manage building up this anthill, manage the actions you need to take versus the ones that you don't care about as much, and still have the spatial aspect of moving around the board, transporting things via chain, kind of a train game aspect of transporting things via a chain of ants back to your anthill in order to stack them out and earn victory points. Very cool with the tile building aspect, the laying of things in the way that you build up your anthill in order to get better actions. Kind of a standard train game mechanic in terms of pickup and delivery on the board, but the way that the two interact is very cool. Definitely suggest checking this one out from the Fragor brothers. That's Antics.
Number 33, At the Gates of Loyang.
This game is probably going to be an unpopular choice because I've chosen my favorite Uwe Rosenberg to be not Agricola, not Le Havre. I've chosen At the Gates of Loyang, which is another game about producing and selling goods. So in this game, you're going to be operating a store, and you're going to be producing goods by planting them out into your fields, harvesting them, and then later selling them to either regular or one-off customers from your store in order to score victory points. The game has a very interesting card drafting mechanic where each player is dealt cards at the start of the round. And then you're going to either discard a card to the center of the table, or on your turn you can pick up one card from the center of the table, keep one card from your hand, and discard the rest of your cards to the center of the table for everyone else to choose from, but that essentially takes you out of the round. Now, this is not considered to be a widely popular Uwe Rosenberg title, not like Agricola or Le Havre or Auret Labor. It's probably one of his least preferred titles by many people, but it's my favorite simply because of the strategic choices in the game in that drafting mechanism. I really like the fact that I may have a handful of cards that I like, but I need to strategically play them to the table to prevent other players from picking them up, and then time it right so that I can grab a card from there, keep one of the cards I like from my hand, and then, work everything out from that point on, depriving other players of specific cards until they've already chosen their cards, and at the same time trying to get what I want from the total card pool. On top of that, the game kind of limits you as so far as how many victory points you can buy. You're only allowed to buy victory points at one point in each turn, and you have to spend an increasing amount of money for each victory point you buy. So, it gets very expensive to buy 2-3 victory points in a turn, limiting you from running away with the game because you have to have a significant amount of extra income in order to really pull away far from the pack. It's a very cool mechanism in terms of the card drafting. The rest of the game plays out very nicely, and you always have these tight games with a very low victory point spread. Everybody feels like they're in the competition, and the game just is kind of fun to play, keeps everybody involved, and never ends up with a runaway leader. Check it out. I know a lot of people haven't played this one. I know it's not necessarily the easiest Uwe Rosenberg title to find, but it's my favorite. Check it out. That's At the Gates of Loyang.
Number 32, Belfort.
Game number 32 is another worker placement. It's one from Tasty Minstrel Games. It's been out for a little while now, and an expansion is up and coming for it. I'm very excited about that. That game is Belfort. Now this is, as I said, a worker placement game, but it also involves an area control aspect. You're going to be placing workers in order to get resources, be it wood or stone or metal. You're also going to be placing workers in order to build buildings. Now these buildings are going to be cards that are in your hand, and you'll have things like taverns or gardens or walls or keeps or gatehouses. And these cards will correspond to abilities that you can use throughout the game, but they're also going to correspond to physical locations out on a board. Now these physical locations are going to be in different sectors of the city of Belfort. There's going to be a tavern in each section. There'll be several walls, a keep in each section, a gatehouse that spans 2 sections that you can build into both. Each of these is going to allow you to exert some type of area control over that sector. But having the most buildings in an area is going to get you victory points at each of the scoring rounds, which will come at certain points throughout the game. They're evenly distributed throughout the game. Now, you can score points for having this area control, and that's a good way to get points. But you can also score points for having the most of each type of worker. If you have the most elves, elves are used to gather wood, or can be used as half of a team to gather metal, or can be used, of course, to gather money, because everyone can get money. If you have the most elves, you'll get some victory points. If you have the most dwarves, which gets you stone, or half of the metal, or again, money, you can get some victory points. If you have the most gnomes, gnomes are guys that activate special abilities of your buildings, you can get some points. So it doesn't necessarily have to focus on the area control, but if you ignore the area control aspect of the game, I doubt you're going to win. Likewise, you can ignore the gating of more workers. You can use your workers efficiently in order to accomplish things out on the board. You may not win if you do so, but it is certainly possible to win with a very small amount of workers, as Andrea has recently shown. So there are different strategies that are going to work out in this game. You're trying to coordinate the worker aspect with the abilities that you have from your buildings, with building those buildings and putting them out in area control. And it all flows together very nicely. It's very easy to learn, and at the same time offers high levels of strategy and a lot of variety from game to game, especially insofar as the way that the cards come out, on the different guilds you can put into play, which are special buildings that have special abilities. You can change these guilds up in order to make the game more interactive, or in order to have more resource production, or to make it more basic if you're kind of trying to teach new players. It's very adaptable. It's easy to play, has the core mechanics of a worker placement, but also gives you that area control mechanism. So, if that sounds good, check it out. That is Belfort from Tasty Minstrel Games, and keep an eye out for the Belfort expansion very soon.
Number 31, Hanabi.
The last game in this video is going to be one that was a Spiel winner from the last year, and that game is Hanabi. A very simple little card game in which each player is going to play their cards facing away from them. Now, in this game, the goal is to make stacks of fireworks. You're going to be trying to make 5 stacks of fireworks, starting from the number 1 and moving up to the number 5. Now, each of these numbers is represented in different amounts in the deck. There are 3 1s, 2 2s, 3s, and 4s, and only 1 5 in each color. And each player doesn't know what they're holding. On a player's turn, you have one of 3 options. You can either play a card from your hand, but if that card can't be played, meaning that the next lower card from that stack is not already out, then you're going to get a strike. And 3 strikes and you're out. You lose the game. The next option is that you can discard a card, and discarding a card is going to return 1 hint to you, which is the third action. You may give a hint to another player. That hint can either be one of 2 types of information. You can tell them that, 1, they have 1 type of card in their hand of a number. So, for example, you can tell them that several cards are 2s from their hand. Or you can give them information about a color in their hand. These 3 cards are all blue. From that information, they're trying to figure out what they're holding and what they can play to the table and what's safe to discard. And basically, you're going to be trying to work together in this cooperative game to make the best score you can by stacking cards. And once the deck runs out, or you get 3 strikes, the game will end. And basically, at that point, you total up your score, the maximum score being 25. 5 on top of each pile. And if you do that, you've won the game. Now, I've played the game, I don't even know how many times now, never yet gotten a score of 25. Very difficult to do so, especially since I'm frequently playing with a new group of players who have, yet to learn the strategy. But even with experienced players, I think the highest score I've accomplished is 23. In addition to that, the game includes an extra set of cards, which are multicolored. They're not one specific color. So figuring out the color of those from the hints is a little bit more difficult. So if you do manage to beat the game, get to a score of 25, you can include this 6th pile, which will raise the maximum score up to 30, and make the game a little bit more difficult. Very simplistic, but has a unique dynamic of not being able to see the stuff in your own hand and trying to work with the other players to try and figure out what they have, what you have, what's playable, and what's not needed. Very cool, one of my favorite cooperative games. I think you should definitely check it out. It's kind of portable, easy to play, and all types of groups like it. That's Hanabi. So there you have it, another 10 games from my favorite games, counting down from number 40 to number 31, with a lot of Euros, a little bit of cooperative card games, and some LCGs to round it all out. Stay tuned next week for another 2 of my videos where we'll go from games 30 all the way down to game 11, and then the week after that we'll go over my top 10 games where you can see what my all-time favorites are, and hopefully they'll appeal to you as well. Check me out in the next couple weeks where we finish the top 100 countdown games of all time by me, Ryan Metzler.